Hey, what's up guys? This is Marc Brunet here, and today I'm going to be teaching you guys how to paint water. So water is one of those things that's, in theory, it's pretty simple, but it's actually pretty hard to execute right. So hopefully I'm going to show you guys like the different steps that I use. There's basically like 3 steps, and you'll be able to do the same. So first things first though, we have to understand how water works. And let's do a quick physics lesson. So what's really important and what we're going to be talking about mostly today, we're not going to be talking about refraction. So that is what happens to the light when it enters the water and how it deforms, and how, like, let's say you have you're standing in water right here, somewhere around here. Let's change that color. Somewhere around here, how your legs are not going to look quite straight, or might look like a lot shorter. It's just, when water enters, and when light enters the water, it bends a little bit, so it changes direction. We're not going to be talking about that though. What we are going to be talking about is water reflection, because that's really what gives the water its look, basically. So I have this image here, and I think it's reflected pretty well here. So if we look at down here, you can see clearly through the water. You see pretty much as if it was as if you were standing by the edge of the lake, looking down at your feet. You'd see this. You can see through the water. You have like a little bit of tint because there's stuff in the water. It's not completely transparent. There's like particles in the water, and but basically, if you were there and you looked straight down, you could see your feet. But as you start to look up and closer and closer, and closer and closer to the horizon and farther away, the water becomes a lot more like a mirror. So you're not able to see through it. All you see is kind of like everything being reflected on it, and that's an interesting property of the water. So that's what I'm gonna try to explain to you guys. All right, so here we have a nice little pool, and some guy standing right next to it. So again, imagine if you're standing by a pool, by a lake, or in the ocean, whatever, and you look down. If there's not too much water, you should be able to see your feet. So those arrows are basically, that's what it indicates. So anything close to you, you'll be able to see pretty much through the water, as if it wasn't reflective at all. And the farther away that you're looking, the more the water will be reflective. And that's another way to think of this is think of the angle that it creates. So this angle here, this is called the angle of incidence, and the bigger that angle of incidence is, the more reflective the water will seem. So in this case here, if you're really close, that angle is going to be really small, as you can see here. So that little like pi here is going to be really small, and that means that the water will seem mostly transparent. So you're not going to be able to really see the reflectivity of the water, the reflectivity property of the water. But if you're really far and you have that angle here like really big, closer to 90 degrees, you're not going to be able to see through the water. You'll see pretty much just the reflected light hitting the water. So anything that's behind it, let's say you have like a mountain or a tree or whatever, that's what you'll see reflected in the water. But you won't see that too much or much at all here. So depending on the angle, if you're looking straight down and that angle is basically 0, there's not going to be any reflectivity whatsoever. In this case, there's some angle, I don't know, like this is what, like 5 degrees, something like that. You will see some reflections, but they're going to be very subtle, so they're going to be pretty hard to see. But yeah, that's very important. So it's also reflected. Let me erase that stuff. Those that red line here, that's kind of what it represents. So when it's opaque around here, the reflectivity of the water is 100%, so you're not going to be able to see through it. And as it fades closer and closer to the character, the more you'll be able to see through it. So let's say you have a bunch of rocks here, at the bottom of that pool or that pond or lake or whatever. The rock that is closer to you, where the angle of incidence is really small, you'll be able to see that rock no problem. But the farther that rock becomes, the more reflection is going to get in the way, and the more you'll see kind of like the ambient, the background, everything else being reflected in the water, and the harder it'll become for you to see that rock. So this rock here and this one here, especially this one, you're probably not going to see at all. This one's going to be very faint, if you can see it at all. And the closer you get to the character, basically the better you'll be able to see that the stuff at the bottom. So yeah, knowing that, fairly simple, right? now we're going to move on to actually painting the water. So we are going to start with this. So as you can see, this is just a desert. There's nothing in there. There's just mountains on the horizon, and this is the entire area that we're going to fill with water. So for this particular case, we're going to fill it up with kind of just regular water. It's not water that's full of seaweed, or that's not full of particles. It's just going to be plain old water, nothing too particular. So this layer here that I add immediately on top of the ground layer is going to be the depth of the water, and kind of like how much light you're able to see from the ocean floor, the ground, basically. So it'll look like all the light's going to get trapped, and all that you'll be able to see is kind of like this really like dark blue. Pretty much, if you look, if you're in the middle of the ocean and you look down, you're not going to be able to see the bottom. There's just too much distance, and the light gets lost. So basically, that's what this layer is. The closer you get to the side, the less water there is. So the easier it'll be for you to see those rocks. And so that's what we're going to be doing here. We're going to be erasing some of that water depth, so that those rocks can start to show a little bit. So let's say over here around the mountains, it gets really, really dark, really deep. We're not going to be able to see the bottom, but around here, where those rocks are not are kind of still in shallow water, we'll be able to see them pretty easily. And then once that's done, so that's consider that layer like the depth of the water, and yeah, the depth is a good way to think of that. And on top of it all, we have the reflection of the water. So now this is considering that the water is 100% reflective everywhere, and there's no wind whatsoever. So the surface of the water is as calm as it can be. And when that happens, it's just a perfect mirror. But as we remember, the closer it gets to the viewer, basically, so the lower it gets in the canvas, the less reflective it seems. So we're going to do the same thing as we did with the depth of the water, and we're going to erase that bottom part here with a soft brush. So that would help erase some of that reflectivity. So when it's close to the bottom here, when the angle of incidence is really, really small, you probably wouldn't see much of the light reflected from the sky. So let's say it looks something like that. Already that's starting to look, somehow realistic, especially those mountains. And but yeah, so now this is pretty much what it would look like if the surface of the water was 100% calm. There was no ripples, nothing, without any waves. That's how you would draw that kind of water, that kind of surface. So of course, most of the time, this is not what you guys are looking for. You're looking for something that has a little bit more waves, or just a little bit of waves or something. So this is what we're going to be doing next. So now that we understand how to construct basically the different layers of water so that it looks like proper water, let's add some waves. So when you have waves, what happens? Simply, it's just that everywhere on the surface of the water, the angle of incidence is different. So where you had like a very, very linear change in the angle, so here around the horizon it's 90 degree, and then as you go down, that number becomes lower and lower until it reaches 0. When you have, let's say, a bunch of waves, maybe that around here is going to be 90 degrees, but then it's going to be something like 85, and then it can jump up to 95, not 95, but like 88, and then down to 20, and then up to 55, and then down to, it changes. It's not a straight line anymore. And what that creates is it creates a lot of noise in the reflective layer. So we're going to be erasing parts of that reflective layer, so to represent those changes in reflectivity all over the place. So yeah, so what I do basically is I start with a big brush, a big soft brush, and you'll start to just erase part of it and start to get a feel for your waves. In this case, as I said, it's a lake, so I don't want the waves to be too big. And of course, as you get closer and closer to the horizon, you want that brush stroke to get smaller and smaller because the waves are getting smaller. They're not getting smaller, but they seem smaller. So, you know, very subtle at the beginning. So already it's starting to look, you know, starting to look interesting. Maybe some bigger waves like this. So basically, the bigger the waves, the more I erase. And when, you know, if I erase completely, it's as if the angle of incidence was 0. So as if you were looking like the wave is kind of like facing you at this point. You know, it's like a wall of water that you can look through. It's not at an angle as it is, you know, right here. So yeah, I'm not gonna erase too much because those waves are not that big. They're just, you know, tiny waves. All right, and that's pretty good. So now I've erased a lot of the reflectivity of some of those parts. But what happens is when the wave here, when the reflectivity is killed, it means that it's curving somewhere else. So it'll be curving at the top. So what we want to do is add that reflectivity back at the top of those waves. So we're gonna again, you know, click, go and pick the color of the sky, and instead of erasing, now we're adding reflectivity to the top of those waves. So I don't know why my float is at so low, but alright, so yeah, we're gonna just go over everything here and kind of just add some more color, add some more reflectivity basically. So this layer is just, we're painting or erasing reflectivity. And if the color of the sky was different, you know, that it would be reflected basically in the water. So if the color of the sky was orange, that water would be orange. That reflective layer would be orange. If there was a bunch of clouds in the sky, same thing. You know, we would see those clouds in that water. All right, it's starting to look pretty good. So now I've gone pretty much over all the different waves. And so as of now, you know, this mountain is still really, really sharp, but as we've seen here, what happens when you have a bunch of waves, it starts to blur basically the image, because all those tiny waves are creating a lot of noise on the surface, and instead of having like a perfect mirrored mountain, you'll have just a blurred mountain basically. So we're going to be doing exactly the same thing here. I'm going to take, you know, this mountain here. If there was a bunch of clouds, we would grab those as well, but yeah, just take the mountain. All right, blur, Gaussian blur. Okay, that should be good. And now what we're going to be doing is just go and get a smudge brush and just blend that a little bit. So we don't want to blend it too much, because at this distance, you know, the waves are starting to get really, really small. So just the tip of the mountain here is going to be kind of like blended with visible brush strokes. Everything else is going to be just too small. So we're going to try to blend this in a little bit nicer, so we won't see the brush strokes, something like that. All right, so now it's looking pretty good. So one thing that I really like to add, you know, when I'm painting water, is kind of like the reflection of the sun, or like little highlights at the top of those waves. And do we have a sun? We do. All right, so I'm just gonna add a little bit of overlay on top of everything to make that scene a little bit more sunny. Let's go grab some yellow, some really light yellow. All right. Okay, and then since we have the sun here, the sun, you know, it's like just a circle, really, really bright circle. And just like the mountain here, it should be reflected down here. So, you know, since there's a bunch of waves now, we're not going to be able to see just like a perfect circle as it would if the surface of the water was 100% calm. But instead, it's even more interesting, because we get to see like parts of the reflection of it at the very top of the waves, right below where the sun is. So we're not going to be seeing highlights down here, like on the sides here. It's going to be like straight down where the sun is, and you'll see those tiny highlights where the water is super reflective and where it reflects the sun directly. You're going to be seeing those tiny highlights. And those add a really nice touch to water. It just makes it look wet for some reason. Alright, and I'm gonna add a little bit of glow to that. Just a little bit. Alright guys, so that would be it. So that's kind of how I paint water. So there's one more thing I want to do actually. Since the water, you know, there's a lot of noise in it, it wouldn't be the same color here anymore. So, you know, we had the same color at the horizon here when it was completely flat, but it's not anymore. So it's gonna darken the waters just Alright, that's more like it. So yeah, basically I was just adding noise to the water. It's just at this point, you know, you're not going to see the waves, but there are going to be waves, so the water is going to be slightly less reflective than it was before, so it's not going to be the same color as the sky anymore. But yeah, so this is how I approach drawing water. So if you want to have different kind of waves, look at different references and see how they look. But yeah, those should be the same steps regardless. So to recap, you have your ground layer, where, you know, it's important because you need to see something through the water. There's something there. There's a ground everywhere, and then you add the depth of the water on top. That could be different colors if the water is you know, is full of stuff, or, you know, whatever. That color can change. In this case, you know, it's just like a typical blue. And then you have the reflection, which is basically just your environment. So if you had a bunch of trees instead, or like if it's the side of a river, then all the jungle parts, all the foliage, all the bushes would be reflected in the water instead of the sky. So yeah, but that's pretty much the only difference. Yeah, there you have it, guys. I'm going to be doing one more thing here, just to show you. I'm going to change the color of the sky and see what happens. So in this case, I'm going to select. Actually, I'm going to select the whole ground layer and change that to like a more orangey color, as if it was like kind of like a sunset scene instead. I'm not going to move the sun because whatever, but let's darken it like that. Alright, it's starting to look pretty cool. But yeah, now as you can see, you know, the reflection in the water, it looks interesting, but it doesn't work. It's reflecting a different sky. So we're gonna fix that, and we're just gonna change that the reflection layer, and probably that depth layer as well, because now it's looking not so much like water. Alright, something like this. And now let's change the reflection layer. And the idea is to match the sky, basically. So I'm going to play with this, color balance, try to match the sky color. So there we go. Now everything is orange. The reflection kind of matches, the reflection layer kind of matches everything else. Those rocks, a little bit crazy. Probably better if they were not all red. So I'm going to change the color for this. Let's go to something a little bit more like a blue. So yeah, something like that. Now that works a little bit better. So yeah, the reflection remains the same, but everything else a little bit darker. So there you go. So it works with pretty much any color. Just gotta make sure that the reflection color matches the sky, and everything else should work out. So thanks a lot for watching. I hope this was somehow helpful. If you liked it, make sure you give it a big thumbs up. This helps spread the video to as many people as possible. If you enjoyed it and you think somebody else might, share it around. That'd be awesome. And yeah, thanks a lot for watching, guys. I will see you guys next time.